In the 16th century, tomatoes made it from the Americas all the way to Europe, but people didn't exactly give them a warm welcome. They were actually terrified of them and thought they were deadly. This fear stuck around for centuries because wealthy people used to eat off pewter plates made with lead. Since tomatoes are acidic, they'd leach that lead right out, causing lead poisoning. But since no one realized what was actually happening, they blamed the tomatoes. So how did this scary fruit turn into the most famous food in the world? Let's dive into the full story. Tomatoes used to grow wild in the Andes Mountains of South America. The people of ancient Mexico were actually the first to farm and domesticate them thousands of years ago. They called them tomatal, which basically means swelling fruit. Then, Spanish and Portuguese explorers arrived in the New World in the late 15th century. They saw tomatoes for the very first time and took the seeds back with them to Europe. They first landed in Spain and then made their way over to Italy. But Europeans looked at tomatoes with a huge amount of fear. The reason was that tomato leaves and their green fruits actually contain an alkaloid called solanine. Plus, other plants from that same family, like belladonna and datura, were already famous for being deadly poisons. In Britain and France, wealthy people used to eat their meals on plates made of pewter mixed with lead. Since lead is a toxic metal that dissolves easily when it touches acids, and tomatoes are packed with citric and malic acid, it was a recipe for disaster. Whenever those acidic tomatoes hit those plates, a chemical reaction kicked in fast. The lead would seep right into the food and then into the bodies of anyone eating it, causing stuff like cramps, stomach pain, and general weakness. That was real deal lead poisoning right there. But people back then didn't know the first thing about chemistry or metal poisoning. They just assumed the tomatoes themselves were the killers. It didn't help that they looked a lot like the poisonous death apples from certain European legends. Europeans used to give tomatoes some pretty spooky names, like poison apple in Germany and poison love apple in France. Over in England, they actually called them wolf apples for 2 whole centuries. Honestly, nobody was brave enough to even take a bite. For example, some people would grow tomatoes in their gardens just for decoration. Their bright red fruit looked super pretty and cheerful, and the climbing vines were used to dress up palace walls. But even then, nobody dared to actually eat them. Then in Italy, around the mid-16th century, some of the lower-income folks in Naples and Sicily started experimenting with tomatoes. They would slow cook them for a long time with garlic, onions, and oil. And guess what? They didn't get sick at all. The secret was that regular people didn't use those lead-filled pewter plates. They were eating off wooden or clay dishes that didn't react with the acid, so they didn't get poisoned at all. Meanwhile, the wealthy kept getting sick because they wouldn't give up their fancy pewter plates. This weird difference actually made some scientists start questioning the truth about tomatoes. If they were really poisonous, then why weren't the poor getting sick? So they ran some simple experiments in the 17th century and figured out that tomatoes are totally safe as long as they aren't cooked in metal containers. As kitchenware evolved in the 18th century, ceramic, glass, and enamel-coated pots started becoming the norm. Lead wasn't contaminating the food anymore, so tomatoes slowly began to spread through European kitchens, especially in Italian pasta sauces. If we look at tomatoes today, they're packed with vitamin C, vitamin A, and powerful antioxidants like lycopene. Lycopene actually protects your cells from damage and keeps your heart strong. It's pretty amazing how much goodness is tucked away inside this little red fruit. And that's how tomatoes went from being a fruit people feared to a total kitchen essential. Today, the world produces over 180 million tons of tomatoes every single year. They're used in everything from sauces and juices to salads and hot dishes. A design this perfect in nature doesn't just happen by accident, it's truly a masterpiece of creation.